Hello, everyone, and welcome back after a nice long lunch. We're going to go straight into our next keynote speaker, who I'm really pleased to introduce today. We've spent the morning discussing what we as professionals have been working on the Trailblazers program, but one of the most important things is remembering that care proceedings have a lasting effect on real people's lives, and it's really important that we all learn from real stories about what it's like for families and children to go through care proceedings. So I'm really pleased to welcome Nickii as our afternoon keynote speaker so she can share her story and her reflections with us all. The Q&A function is still open if you would like to ask anything through this. Welcome, Nickii.
Afternoon. Thank you very much, Morgan. Yeah, so I'm Nickii. Yeah, and I'm a parent. Been through. So I kind of just want to say first that I'm not here to attack the system. I kind of acknowledged that yesterday. I'm not looking back over my notes. It may come across very critical. It's not. It's certainly not intended that way. This is just my experience, and the kind of the ongoing um situations that we found ourselves in. My background, I came from a very broken home as a child, and I found my way into drugs at a very young age, teenage years, um, and that continued unhealthy relationships, crime, drugs, and so ultimately, when I had my children a little bit later in life, they came into that world with me. Um, and we had So I've been through both sets of two different sets of court proceedings. I've been through standard proceedings. I've also been through the FDAC standard proceedings. For my older sons, we went through standard proceedings. And we had local authority involvement from when the boys were small. They were on child in need plans. They were on child protection plans. Their kind of pre-proceedings for my boys was long. It was very, very long. We bounced backwards and forwards quite a lot from child protection to child in need, and then it was kind of we were coming out, we weren't doing, then it was back in the court again. And what I kind of looking back on that now, it was a really lonely time. It was a really difficult time. I didn't get offered any external support at all during that time. That I was never signposted anywhere. Um, I had a I was suffering a lot of trauma. Um, it was not recognised. It was not picked up on. I know we do a lot of trauma informed practice now. I would hope it's widespread, very widespread. But just from my point of view back then, it wasn't. And kind of the trauma that I went through was it was either not recognised, not noticed. Um, Therefore, that meant that I didn't even notice it. I didn't even realize that that was what I was experiencing. Or when I did speak to professionals about it, it was ignored or kind of felt like it was being used against me. It's very re-traumatizing to have a lot of my negative situations and my um, struggles used in reports or in court settings as a way to how it felt to me to criticize my parenting and to criticize my life choices when actually I didn't know any different. I didn't know there were other ways of living. I didn't know that what other way I was living wasn't normal because to me this was normal. Um, Genuinely believed since I had my children, I stopped doing crime every day. I wasn't using half as many drugs as I used to. I thought that was good. I thought I was doing good. I thought I was doing okay. Um, didn't realize that the people around me were negative and that the relationships I were in were dangerous and that me and my children weren't actually safe because it was normal for me. There was nobody to say to me, this is not okay. This is how we do it differently. Because something I was thinking about last night, if we're looking to change lives for children, we've got to look at changing the lives for the parents. If you're not given an alternative, being told I needed to change my life was one thing, but then not being presented with an alternative. Not only did I not know how to change my life, I didn't know what I was changing it to or what I was changing it for, or there needs to be an alternative presented. Um, And I didn't have that. I didn't have that. Our court proceedings, this is the mad thing. I noticed this last night. Both my court proceedings were actual in-court proceedings from start to finish, first hearing to final hearing, were 14 months. That's both sets. And I didn't realize that till last night. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, do you know what it is for me? It wasn't about the time scale. It was about what we did with that time and what was done in that time to make things different. In those first proceedings, we had the three hearings. We had three hearings. I think there were three. This is the bad thing. I can't even really remember. It was that, it was that kind of, the first proceedings were really quite traumatizing for me to the point where I have blocked quite a lot of it. So, my recollection is quite sketchy, which is it's not great. I don't remember any of the names of anyone that was involved in those proceedings. And the thing is, neither do my children. My children aren't even really aware that those proceedings happened. They didn't meet anybody. They didn't talk to anybody. Ultimately, we were given an SGO. Well, my mum was given the SGO at that time. My children were very small. They were small. They were preschool, like, primary school age. And so their opinions weren't, at that point, weren't important because they were under 10. So they didn't get a say. They weren't ever asked what it was like for them, what was going on for them. They became through that period. And then for the post proceedings, that time afterwards, that whole time that we were in court, I was talked about a lot around me, in the same room as me. I'm in the room, but nobody talked to me. Nobody asked me anything. I very rarely even acknowledged. It was always done through someone else that I didn't know. They don't know me. People were making decisions on my life and my children's life. They'd never met me. They'd probably only met my children once. And they were 3 and 4, having a 20-minute conversation with a 3 and 4-year-old, and then making their life decisions on that. It was it felt very disconnected for me. It felt very disconnected. It felt very I was very excluded. I felt very excluded. Now I've been listening this morning, and actually every time I come to one of these events, it makes me very, very aware of the work that goes on behind the scenes, that us as parents, we don't know that's going on. And I think that's the key. We don't know that's going on. So to us, we're brought into court, we're told we've got to do this, then it's off we go. And then we've got months and months, over a year sometimes, of just what's going on. Don't know what's going on. Nobody contacts us anymore. It genuinely feels like once the children have gone, we're not important anymore. And I know that probably sounds like a bit of a me pity party, but the hindsight for me, what I've learned is that if I'm healthy, my children can then be healthy. And at that point, we weren't. I was not well. I was very, very unwell. And it certainly felt to me like I was being criticized for my decisions and my life choices because I chose them. But they were choices. But they were choices out of ignorance. They were choices out of naivety. I didn't know. I genuinely didn't know any different. And there was kind of nothing in place to show me that. There was nobody recognized that. Actually, people probably used to recognize that my relationships were unhealthy, but nobody thought to actually educate me on that and go, actually, let me get you this, let's do this, no signposting, none of that stuff. Ultimately, midway through the proceedings, I don't even know which point it was, I actually realized I'd been criticized so much. There was never any praise. I was never praised. It was always every report, every time somebody talked about me, it was about saying what I was doing wrong, always telling the court or telling other professionals what I'd done wrong, what I was doing wrong, what I wasn't doing right. So ultimately, as I've gone along, I've got all these traumatic issues anyway, and these self-esteem issues. I start to believe that. And I actually start to think, why am I bothering? I'm actually rubbish. Like, I'm no good at this. I'm actually, my children are probably better off without me. So do you know what? I can't get clean. I failed a drug test. Nobody looked at one drug test. Why? Why did you fail that drug test? Nobody asked. It was just that, bam, done. So I was like, you know what? Yeah. I stepped away from proceedings. And I didn't even show up for the last few because I actually thought there's no point me being there. I'm their mother. And I felt like I wasn't important. I wasn't key to those proceedings. That was how I felt. And So I stepped away, and ultimately the SJ was given to my mum, and she took on their care, and I spiraled. I was then left with this big void, massive sense of failure. So I spiraled, and I got worse. There was no follow up. There was no and I feel like, and I see this. I work in services now, so I see this in other families that get given SGOs. There's no review. There's no um, kind of recourse if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't go. I was extremely fortunate. My mum worked quite hard to maintain and make sure that we had a relationship, that I had a relationship with my children. That year or so that I spiraled and went into a really, really dark place after the SJ was awarded, we didn't have much contact at all because, yeah, it wasn't safe. As I started to come out of that, my mum did encourage it. And I was very, very fortunate. Lots of people I work with don't get that. They don't have that. So the SGO, the relationship between the carers and the parents breaks down. Relationships lost. It's very, very difficult to have someone to go to. Who do you go to? And I've heard this kind of mentioned this morning about the collaboration between services. For me, there was none. Every time I had to deal with a different agency, I had to deal with that agency on my own. I'm having to retell my story. I'm having to retell my situation. It's really traumatizing. You sometimes, and sometimes getting different responses, but it's a stranger each time, and and here's the madness of it. I would happily trust, at that point in my life, I would happily trust a criminal heroin addict over one of you guys, over a social worker, over a court, over the police, over teachers, over doctors, over anybody in a professional setting. I saw them as the enemy, and that was just promoted to me more through proceedings because it always seemed like a them and us. It was always very much them and us. I'm on this side, they're on that side, and there was lots of people on that side, and I was just on this side, like getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and it was very scary. I've been told that I'm brave to tell my story. And I have to come back with that and go, what's brave is walking in when you're still battling addiction, you're still battling domestic violence, you're still dealing with all kinds of mental health conditions, you're being re-traumatized on a regular basis, you're very lonely and you're on your own, and you're walking into a courtroom with lots of professionals that you are pretty certain are going to criticize you and judge you and not see things for you, and they're going to talk about you and pull up all your criticisms, but you do it anyway because you're going in there to fight for your children, to fight for your families, and you walk in there anyway. That's brave. That's brave. And we do that. Parents are doing that every single day. You guys know that, you work with us. But yeah, I feel like very often it's really dehumanizing, the whole process of being kind of those one or two different. I had a different judge each time, multiple social workers. And I know that I've put this down as a note. It always felt like the staff I worked with were overworked, underfunded, resources are stretched. So it was very much a tick box exercise, and let's just bam, 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 bam. Okay, next on. That was how it felt, when actually this is my life and my children's lives. And my children during that time were and I look back on it now and I didn't notice at the time. Somebody should have noticed. Nobody noticed. They were very introverted. They were very quiet. They went very small. My children, they just trying not to be seen, I think. That got better, ultimately got better as my mum and I started to co-parent together. We did get better. I had another child. We ended up back in proceedings, straight back into proceedings. No pre-proceedings this time, straight back in. This time, I went through FDAC. It's life-changing, absolutely life-changing. I'm aware I'm not here to promote FDAC. That's not what I'm here to do today. But it was that, for me, it was that collaborative approach, which you've talked about today. The services came together. I had a key worker, and I'm really interested in that parental advocate that was mentioned earlier. Even if you can't have a key worker, I didn't know my key worker was a social worker. When I found out, I was like, what? Oh my God, I've actually got on with the social worker. It was really nice. But having that key worker to be there as that go-to, somebody to go to, someone to deal with professionals with me. So, and the worst thing, the legal speak, standard proceedings, the legal jargon, the chat, the procedural stuff. Oh my God, I'm not educated. I don't know this stuff. And by the time I come out, my head's blown. I have no idea what's going on. It's all just a big lot of noise. And I've got to go away and unpick that and then find somebody to explain it to me before I can get back in. And we're talking about time delays. I remember asking the court for delays to have like adjournments for stuff, and it was always refused. And then I'd notice the local authority would not get stuff done on time, and they'd get a fine, and it really felt like, okay, we'll take the fine because we've got adjourned for a couple of months. So proceedings was dragged on for that. But if I ever needed an extension, it was never given. And, there's reasons for that. But it's just what I'm trying to get across is just the way that it feels very one-sided, these proceedings. It doesn't feel like a team approach. I'm trying to be quite mindful of time now because I know I can go on a bit of a soapbox when I get an opportunity. But I think kind of what I really wanted to say was that, definitely that collaborative approach, definitely looking at understanding addiction, understanding domestic abuse, and we work trauma informed now, and that's a gift. Understanding trauma responses and things like that. It's so important to understand why we do what we do, why we're not great parents, why we're struggling, what's going on for us, why we're in these dangerous relationships, because half the time most of us don't know, we don't realize, and we need somebody with a clear head, with a little bit of compassion and understanding to come through and explain it to us and walk us through it, and just don't do the journey for us, just hold our hand while we go through it. And that's really what we need, I think, just to be seen as a person, understand my trauma, and understand that if I'm well, my children are going to be well. I am well today. I am clean. I'm in recovery. I'm nearly 6 years into my recovery. I'm an associate at the Centre for Justice Innovation. So I'm here today. Lovely Sophie. I work in services. I support families going through family court. And I try to support them as best I can because I've been there and I know how they feel. And we don't judge. Don't judge us. Please don't judge us. We didn't ask for this. Most of us didn't ask for this, and we didn't mean to be here. But I certainly know that as I've got well, my children have got well. I see my teenage sons now advocating for their friends that have got addict parents. And it's so beautiful to see that what I've learned has filtered down to them and that they can share that with their friends now. And we all live in the same house. My 5-year-old little girl's never seen me high, drunk. There's no alcohol in the house. She's safe in this house today. Who knows where we would be if I wasn't healthy, if I wasn't fit and healthy, if I'd have accepted that I'm a terrible parent and I'm never going to be able to do this. I don't know where we'd be. I certainly wouldn't be here today with you lovely people. Yeah, I think that's it. I can support others now because I had that opportunity to be believed, to have someone believe in me and to get that support that I absolutely needed. And it was really fun. And it's very, very exciting to see this, to see this sort of thing going on, because it gives me hope. It certainly gives me a lot of hope. And I do think that, while we're waiting for these court proceedings to go through, I don't think if it takes a year, it takes a year, so long as that year is used to improve us and to help us to grow and to help us become better people so that we can be better parents. That's what we need. That's what we need. I feel like I'm going to shut up now because my phone's stopped telling me how long I've been chitter-chattering. So I'm going to stop and just hand back to Morgan. But thank you for listening and thank you for being here and being interested in this subject.
Thank you so much, Nickii. It's, as has popped up in the Q&A, there's no questions for you, sort of unsurprisingly, but a couple of comments which I think are really important to just reflect back here. Your voice is so important to this. We can learn so much from you, from what you have gone through and what you've been good enough to come and speak to us about today. We really appreciate that you've come along and shared this with us, and been so open and honest and vulnerable with us as well. It's really important for us to hear this. So thank you again so much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you so much for asking me. It's exciting. It's an honor to get to do this stuff now. It's recovery right there, right?